Hello and welcome to the Nicole Harris podcast. I am your host, Nicole Harris, and joining me today is Reginald Caldwell. And thank you so much for spending time with us today. If you would like to go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your profession.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. My name is Reginald Caldwell, and I am a business consultant in Detroit, Michigan. I help startups grow their business and expand, or I help anyone who's looking to start a business that doesn't know where to start, how to get in touch with the state of Michigan, get their documentation in order, creating strategies and marketing plans to get them off the ground, and also assist those customers in improving their financial status via credit or budgeting or any other financial avenues that they would like to look into.
That is awesome. How did you get into this professional? What made you choose this field?
So for me, it started in college. Excuse me. Some of my roommates, well, not my roommates, some of my classmates, we realized in college that everyone, when you come out, wants you to have experience before they give you a job, but no one will give you a job to get the experience.
Right.
So how do you overcome the hurdle? And for me, my approach to it was, well, as college students, if internships are 5,000 students per position, how are we going to get the experience based on the resources that we have? And I decided to create a small consulting firm. Excuse me. So my classmates and I gave free consulting advice to local businesses.
Oh.
And I put together a group of us, one person from each major, and we would take on different projects and we would work with professors, and that gave us experience on our resume. And that gave the local business owners some access to information and expertise they otherwise would not have or would not be able to afford to get, either because they didn't have the time or the money to gain that information. So it was a win-win for everybody involved.
Wow, that's awesome. And that's very smart. That is a very good idea. And so basically that took you into the business that you have now?
It did. I did tell my classmates at the time I wasn't going to turn that particular one into a business. I did dissolve it with the state of Michigan. I had a few other businesses. I had sold electronics when I was in college, so I sold like headphones and tablets and that kind of stuff. I started that one just to test some of the things I was learning in a classroom, because I personally, when I learn new information, I want to know what are the limits of the information, because everything has a limitation. So I started a business just to test the things I was learning, and it did well, I guess well enough for what I was trying to accomplish, and I ended up selling that business. But after I graduated, I did start the consulting firm, and I'm very happy with it.
How does your consulting firm make an impact within your community? How are you able to better help, especially some of the Black people who are trying to start businesses but don't know how to reach out to the right person? Because I see a lot of people on social media who are trying to get their business off the ground, but they're having a hard time getting people to connect to or connect with.
So as far as the Black community, for me, I think the key is knowing first what you don't know, or at least knowing what your own limitations are, and being humble enough to go and find someone that can do those things. So for myself, I know how to design a website, but I'm not as well versed in it as, for example, an actual website designer. Mm-hmm. So where I can help you tweak your website, if you want a total build out from the ground up, I can do it. It's going to take me longer, but to make sure I maximize the impact for my clients, I go and find a website designer, and I have a few that I've worked with that I would personally recommend. But for most people, it's going to come down to the education and knowing what your own limitations are. Because that you have to take a really hard look in the mirror and say, I don't know how to do this, or I can't do this. And it's okay, because nobody can do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter who you are. So figure out what it is that you want to be good at, work at that every day, and then put a team around you that can do the things you can't do, or the things that you're not as interested or as passionate in pursuing.
Okay. So is the best way in finding someone to help build a team, the best thing to do is by researching?
I think it is in researching, and I also think it is in knowing what your team needs. But you have to first know yourself to know that. So for myself, for example, I know I'm a strategist.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what limitations you give me to work within. As long as I know the limitations and the resources, I can give you a way to accomplish whatever it is we're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
But that doesn't make me a great salesperson. And I understand that. That's part of the limitations of being a skilled strategist. So I have to put people in place that can sell to grow businesses, my own or others for that matter. But I'm honest with myself about my limitations. And I think that part is a hard thing to do. Not that Black people can't do it. It's just that Black people, we always have to do, a lot of times we have to do everything.
Okay.
And it's hard to accept we can't do everything.
Okay.
Especially for single parents. Like single parents, they are amazing. By far, some of the most amazing people I've ever met.
Right.
Do stretch themselves so far because they don't have a team and they don't know how to create a team. So they just do everything they can as much as they can all the time. And that creates a repetitive cycle for those children a lot of times, that they feel like they have to do the exact same thing. Okay. So everyone's trying to grow up and be the MVP or the all-star of a one-man team, but you don't build success that way.
And so basically you're saying it's hard to do it by yourself, that you need a team around you in order to do those things to be more effective or efficient?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You're only going to go as far as your team can take you.
Okay. And so I read a while ago the statistic that Black women are doing very well as business owners, but they're having such a hard time with funding that although they own the business, they're not bringing in as much revenue as their competitors. Do you have a solution for that as far as funding and to help find funding or where to go for funding?
So as far as funding goes, there are a lot of different revenues. I would say it'll mostly depend on their business model that they're trying to execute. And that will better dictate what type of funding is available. Aside from grants, which there are thousands of grants, what I would recommend for any small business owner, especially any Black women, because they're a double minority. So if you can get in touch with a grant writer that's solid in your area that you can work with locally, I would start there. Beyond that, look at what investment options you have. So you have some investors that are strictly hard money lenders. They would put up $30,000. They want 30% back in X amount of time. Can your business deliver? If so, that might be an option for you. Another option could be equity investment. So if I were to invest $20,000 into a business, I want 10 or 15% equity. Okay. Kind of like what they do on Shark Tank.
Okay. So what do you think about other options? Do you think like crowdfunding and things like that would better help serve the community if we came together to help as far as like pool and funding to help individual people to get their business up and running?
So I think it will, but at least for me as a strategist, I try to think all the way through to the conclusion to think critically about what options we're looking at. So if you take crowdfunding, for example, and you decide, okay, we want to, as a Black community, invest in a real estate company. Okay, well, across 8 states, you might have 300 or 400 of them. Mm-hmm. So then if you say, okay, well, we only want to invest in the Black real estate company. Okay, so now you're down to 20. How do you pick which 20, or do you invest in all of them equally? Because if so, if you were going to put up $200,000 or $300,000, that gets sliced down pretty quickly the more hands you put in that pot.
Right.
And how, even if you wanted to pick one, how do you justify this one over the others? Because the others might now feel slighted, and now you have a bit of a problem. Or do you just rotate it? Like, how would you? I would more so be thinking of how do we execute through to the end result with as minimal collateral damage as possible.
Okay.
It could be done as long as everyone decides collectively how are we going to execute, and everyone's on the same page.
Okay. Do you think it's smart to start a family business where it's instead of going at it alone, trying to open a restaurant per se, as and adding 2 or 3 or 4 family members to go in it with you? Do you think that's wiser?
I think that can work as long as all of the family members understand what it takes to start and run that business, and they all have the same passion for it.
Okay.
So I don't think, for example, if a father decided he wanted to start a restaurant for the family, and he decided, okay, well, my kids are going to work in this business, and his kids get to be in their 20s and they want to go away to college, and they don't want to work in his restaurant. They want to go into finance or marketing, or maybe they want to be doctors or lawyers, but they don't have the same passion for his business. Who's going to pick up the slack?
Okay.
That's where a lot of family businesses tend to fall apart, and they end up either sold or collapsing, is because there isn't anyone there that has the same passion as the owner. So if you want to start a business, again, it's going to go back to your team. Who are you going to start this business with? And do they have the same passion for it that you do? Because if you try to force someone into a position they don't want to be in, they're not as likely to put any effort into it, and they're not going to succeed at it.
Right. Okay. So I hear you talk a lot about team as being the key component. Who is the strongest person that you would start in your team? Is it an accountant? I mean, who is the first person that you would go searching for to start your team?
So I would say that part's going to depend, again, on who's starting the business. So, for example, I have a friend of mine from college who is very much a visionary. Okay. He will start any number of businesses, any number of different ways, but where his skill set is not to his advantage is on the follow through and the consistency over time, because he tends to lose interest and move on to something else. So for him, his strongest component is whoever can keep him focused on that task, or he can give the task to them and they follow it through to its conclusion. Okay. Which may not necessarily be an accountant or a lawyer. By all means, I am saying every business needs an accountant and a lawyer. Right. Hands down. But that may not necessarily be the most key component to the start of your business, because you have to pay an accountant and a lawyer, and if you don't have any money, you can't go get one. Okay.
How do we begin to, as a community, to start being able to be, the business, because it wouldn't be anything new. It's been done before. So stopping us from being that successful as we were in the past.
I think it's the illusion of choice. And by that, I mean, so I don't have any children. I have nieces and nephews, like a whole lot of them. But when I watch my siblings who do have children interact with my nieces and nephews, they tend to give them, when they come to a fork in the road, they give them a choice of A or B. Mm-hmm. It gives the child the illusion that they have the freedom to choose what they want. In reality, the parent has already pre-selected the choices, so you don't really have as much choice as you think you do. You just feel like you do. Mm. And I think that ends up being the case for a lot of Black people today. They only think, well, the way to create wealth is either be in music, be a drug dealer, or be an athlete. Okay. It's not the case. You could be a real estate agent, you could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could own businesses, you could own several businesses, you could do anything you want to do, as long as you know what options are available to you and you maximize the options you have available. But you can't do that if you don't see the options.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we're having is I don't think it's a lack of desire or not wanting to. I think it's just that a lot of the times the opportunities or choices are not presented to them. It's certainly not presented in the high schools, because I think that they're basically taught in high school how to work. I don't even think that they really give them the option to start a business out of school. It's basically work or go to college. So they're really not presented with a lot of ideas to even think about going in that direction.
So, yes, but high school, so for example, I went to Brother Rice High School as a freshman. It's a predominantly white Catholic school. My 10th grade year, I was at a predominantly Black Catholic school, which closed down, and it was a charter school.
Okay.
What I've seen across both, at Brother Rice, where the kids drove BMWs to school, and in Detroit, where you got either you caught the bus or maybe your parents let you drive their car, or they bought you a little beater car to drive around as a high school student. Mm-hmm. The core curriculum was the same. It didn't matter high school, college, elementary school, middle school. It's essentially designed to create employees.
Right.
At every level. The difference is going to be how the perception you take on the information is given to you. Mm-hmm. So myself, for example, any of my classmates could have decided, hey, we have the same problem where we're not going to have experience when we graduate. How do we fix this? But none of them decided to create their own space to be able to gain the experience they would not have otherwise had, just because they didn't think critically about it. But they did not take the blinders off. To them, their only options were either go get a part-time job or get an internship. Mm-hmm. Nobody decided to think, very few people decided to think outside of, okay, well, I understand you gave me these options, but what if this? Mm-hmm. And take it a step further and keep going until you get to a conclusion. I remember the first time I actually had this realization, I was a kid. I was like 12 or 13. And my mom and I don't even remember what we were debating about, but she told me, I'm the parent, I'm always right. And my question to her was, how do you know that? And she said, no. And I was like, but you've never had a son before, and I'm your first child. So how do you know you're doing this right? You've never been here. And she just looked at me. I was like, you're winging it just like I am. It's okay that you are, because you can't know everything, but don't present to me like you know everything when you don't. Right. I get that the parent wants to make the kid feel safe, but I'm not like the rest of the kids. You
Right.
can't give me this false perception of things and expect me to accept it, because I'm going to ask you some challenging questions. And when
Right.
you don't have answers, it's going to fall apart.
Mm-hmm. That's
But
true.
you have to think outside of just the information that's been presented to you and ask yourself, okay, well, I understand this has been presented to me as a fact, but what if it wasn't? If we take this off the table, what else is there? And now you have to think critically and challenge yourself to go beyond just the information that was given to you. And now you have to go find answers.
I want to switch gears with you. And I noticed as I went on your page that I saw that you did travel a lot. Can you tell me about some of the experiences you've had in traveling and some of the places that you've traveled to?
Um, so I've done a lot of traveling. I started traveling as a kid because my mom worked for Northwest Airlines. She was the vice president of the union. Um, so I have taken trips outside of the country, Mexico, China. We didn't go to Japan. We have gone to Paris, the Bahamas, Virgin Islands. We went to Dubai last year.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
That one was a lot of fun. A lot of the the tour guy we had thought I was a local.
Of course.
And my godbrother and I bought some of the local attire. I can't remember what it's called, but we wore it on the last day because we had a barbecue in the desert.
Okay.
And they were making fun of us the entire time. My mom said I was going to get left there. They wouldn't let me back on the airplane. This year, we're taking a trip to Greece.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I think next year we try to plan out our trips a couple years in advance. So we go in groups. So for Dubai, I think there was like 30 of us.
Wow.
For Greece, there's going to be maybe 10 or 15. And we try to give everybody time to pay on it over time.
Okay.
But I think international travel is definitely something everyone should experience.
Right.
Only because it gives you a perspective outside of what was your norm. And it's very easy to do as an American, not just being Black aside, just as an American. Americans tend to think everything else is just like ours, and it's not.
Right.
And we also tend to think we're the center of attention, and
Right.
we usually are, but for the wrong reasons. It definitely level sets your perception of everything.
Right.
Have a deeper appreciation for other cultures. And it, at least for me, I majored in international business in college, and if I ever have children one day, I definitely will be extremely adamant about them having international exposure.
Right.
Because it definitely, it creates a sense of value that you would otherwise not have.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that you will ever visit Africa?
So next year, I think we're going to the Bahamas again, or Jamaica. And the year after is supposed to be Africa. And the year after that is supposed to be Paris. But we're trying to figure out for Africa if it's going to be Egypt and then going over to Jordan. My brother wants to go to Morocco.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my godbrother, I think it was my godbrother, that wants to go to South Africa. Okay. So my suggestion, I wanted to do Egypt. My suggestion is to do research on the political climate before we go, mm-hmm. because I know how that can impact what happens while you're there, just because I did international business. So my suggestion to them was to do more research on the climate, because I may not, even once we get ready to go, I may decide, all right, Egypt is not the place to go. It's a little too politically hot right now. So let's take a step back. Let's figure out someplace else to go, or maybe go to a different region altogether.
Right.
Bali or somewhere else. But I definitely think trying to get them, excuse me, trying to get my siblings and my family members to think more critically about where we're going and not just as a tourist. Because when you're there as a tourist, everyone knows that you're a tourist, but they don't really care.
Okay. And so when you travel, you said it's a group. Is it basically just family and friends, or can anyone join?
Usually so far it's just been family and friends. We have had friends of the family go. It just depends on who all wants to go. I think for the Greece trip, we started with like 25, and a lot of people dropped out. I think for Dubai, we started with like 60.
Wow.
Yeah, it's, as my grandfather told me when I was younger, a lot of people say a lot of things.
Right.
Don't listen to the words, follow the actions. The actions will always tell you what the intention is. And when it comes time to cut a check in business or personally, that's usually when things tend to die down quite a bit. And you see who's really going to go and who isn't.
Right.
So we just couldn't afford it. And I get it, which is why we start trying to plan our trips further. So you have time to pay on it over time.
Right. And how long do you all stay?
I think Dubai was 12 days. Greece, I think, is going to be 2 weeks maybe. And depending on where we go in Africa, I know one of the safaris we were looking at was 3 weeks. Wow. But I'm not sure if we're going to be going on that one. It depends on what we decide.
Okay. And so I see that you're a vegan or vegetarian. Has any of the traveling that you've done changed your views on how you eat or your diet?
So it hasn't. What did was, in my family, I had a lot of people that had cancer. Like my father had passed from pancreatic cancer. My older sister passed from breast cancer after her third fight. And her son, he passed from brain cancer at 8.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. I've had a lot of other family members pass from it also. But I remember from my father, the diet change that he had. And he had to go from eating meat on a regular basis to a completely vegan, holistic diet. And it was a shock for him. And my father, it was kind of funny. Whenever he wanted to eat like a corned beef sandwich or pizza, he would buy it and then watch us eat it because he couldn't eat it. Me and my siblings, we was like, all right, Dad, I know you want to eat the corned beef sandwich, but this is like the 4th day in a row we've had corned beef.
Right. Okay.
But I started to look at how diet impacts your health. And one of the things that got me back into eating clean and healthy again after I stopped playing football was I saw the documentary, What the Health. And it didn't make me want to become vegan or vegetarian at all. But what it did do was spark my mind to think more critically about what was said in the documentary. Right. So I looked into it. And for a lot of Black people, we believe diabetes or high blood pressure, these things run in our family. That's not actually the case because you weren't born with it. What does run in your family is habits. Right. Because what you tend to do is the things that you see the most often by the people around you. Right. So if you're used to eating fast food and fried food all the time, you're going to do the exact same thing, which is going to get you the exact same result.
Exactly.
So for me, I did transition over time. So I cook like a lot. When I did eat, I would do like sauteed lamb and Italian, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And for me, I started trying to change my diet because I found myself repeatedly eating some of the same things. So for like 2 or 3 months at a time, I would pick another cuisine. So it would be like Japanese or Asian, and then I would change it to Indian, and then it would be like Southern or vegetarian or Italian. And when I wanted to do vegetarian, it proved to be more challenging than I realized.
Okay.
I decided, okay, if you really want to do this, anything you want to build and be successful takes time. So
Right.
let's do it over time. So I started, all right, on weekends, only vegetarian meals. I'll eat my regular meals the rest of the week. And then I moved it up to 3 days a week. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, vegetarian. The rest of the week is going to be meat. And when I bumped it up to 4 days, then 5 days, and it was vegetarian during the week, meat on weekends. And I slowly worked myself up to vegetarian 7 days a week.
Okay.
After I was strictly vegetarian for a year, I decided, okay, what about vegan?
Mm-hmm.
I gave myself a year. So by the end of this year, I want to be 100% vegan. I've already cut dairy out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I've already cut out honey. I'm not sure what else doesn't fit in my diet because I'm still learning about being vegan. But
Mm-hmm.
everything that I'm learning, I'm trying to implement as I learn it or
Right.
find, excuse me, smart ways to implement it. So that gives me time to find a substitute for butter, like a vegan substitute, or
Right.
a vegan substitute for eggs, which I don't really eat a lot of, but they are in a lot of recipes when you cook.
Right.
So trying to find those substitutes that don't taste bad, because a lot of the vegan food tastes terrible. Um, I'm just going to be honest with you. I get why some meat eaters don't want to do it because they don't like the way the food tastes. And it's true. You just have to work and find what you like.
Right.
This
That's
time,
true.
I take trial and error, and I hate trial and error like more than everyone knows. But it does take time and it does take some dedication. If you're
Right.
passionate about it and you really want to do it, I think everyone can. But it might not be for everyone.
I really think, that's a lot in how my story is in my journey. I think it just started with my mindset, with changing first my thought process about how I view food and, like you were saying, what food does to you and the body. I really didn't have to watch any scary videos or any documentaries or anything like that. I just consciously knew that, and I think really it started with me from childhood. I really just did not like meat. I really didn't. I didn't have to have it. I was very happy and excited with just sides. We were always given like a meat and like two or three sides. And I would just clear all of my sides, but I would just sit there thinking, I'm really full and I really don't have to have this. But when we were younger, your parents thought, you know, clean your plate
Yeah.
because everything that you eat is good for you. And they would show you the pyramid and oh, you need your meats and you need these, you need your dairy, and then come to find out now, a lot of those things that they were telling us that we needed, we didn't need. So it was basically just changing my thoughts. And when I got older, I was like, what am I doing? I don't live with my mother and father anymore. I can eat or not eat whatever, I want or don't want to. And so it was just like a freedom to me. I think I've always wanted to be this way. So yeah, it was just like a light bulb one day and I was like, I'm not doing it anymore. And that was just it. And so I haven't looked back and I love it. And yeah, so I think, it's just about if you're wanting to do it, it's something you can explore. But like you said, the way you started with doing a little bit here, doing a little bit these days is the best way to go than just doing it cold turkey, because you're definitely gonna rebound if you do it that way.
Absolutely. I remember when I used to do personal training, For any clients that I had, I would tell them, or if you love French fries, don't go weeks or months without eating French fries.
Right.
What's going to happen is the first time you have a French fry, you're going to eat it
Go
every
for
day, all day, 3 or 4 weeks, and undo 6 months worth of work.
Right.
If you want it, if you're really craving it, okay, it's fine. Go get a small fry,
Right.
yourself enough to satisfy the craving,
Mm-hmm.
move on. But
Right.
don't deny yourself from it. Now, the downside to that in terms of meat or going vegetarian is typically when you go back, you get sick.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't gone back yet. I do have a few friends that went vegetarian for a while. And once they started, they tried to go back and eat meat, and their body didn't like it.
Okay.
It
Yeah, I
ended up,
haven't gone back, so I wouldn't know, but I just don't want to. I don't even think about it anymore. It's just my lifestyle. It's my way now. So,
I agree. For me, it's the exact same way. I don't even think twice in a grocery store walking past the meat department anymore. I used to, but now not at all. It's my lifestyle now. When I first started, I used to hesitate when I went into a grocery store or into a butcher shop, but now it doesn't bother me at all. I think for everybody, anyone who wants to do it, they should. Well, I think this is the case for any lifestyle change. You should really evaluate why you want to make that change,
right.
because that will determine how you respond when you hit adversity. Because at any point, anything you want to do, if it's a business you want to start, if it's a lifestyle change you want to make, something in life is going to come along and hit you in the face and tell you it's easier to do what you've always been doing. And
Mm-hmm.
unless you have a solid reason for why you decided to make that lifestyle change, you're going to collapse. So
Right.
think long and hard about it before you do it, and then make the commitment based on that level. For me, it was overall health and making sure I had a better lifestyle, not just now, but in the future when I get older.
Right.
I tend to look at things in the long term and make long-term investments. So
Right.
it didn't matter what happened now, because my focus was 20, 30, and 40 years from now.
Right. That's a very good reason for doing it, definitely, because I think in the long run it is going to help. And I think the changes that we're making now is certainly going to change a lot of the generations that's coming behind us, how they view and look at food as well. I want to ask you, what type of music do you listen to?
Oh man, I listen to some of everything. I have some old school like Temptations on my playlist. I have Tupac on my playlist.
Okay.
I have Frank Sinatra on my playlist. I have Beethoven on my playlist. I listen to some of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Just anything that I find mentally stimulating.
Okay. So it could just be any given day is what you feeling?
Pretty much. Out of, was that maybe a week ago? I was listening to, I think, Ed Sheeran, and right after one of his songs, it was Big Boy, and right after that, it was I think it's Frank Sinatra, Bewitched, and right after that, it was something else like totally different. Like my playlist is it's very random.
Yeah, I get that. I'm like that too. I think that when I'm driving on long rides, classical music really is calming to me. It just soothes it. I don't know. I get really deep in thought when I'm listening to it. But if it's something where I'm just, short drives, or just, it's really just, something that just kind of like pep me up. I've noticed that in the morning I do need that pep, so I'll play faster music or things like that. But yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that. I feel like, music can take you on so many different avenues and different places that it can take you to, that I think that it has to be pretty broad, because when I think about music, I think about different times and I think about different places, and it just sets the tone sometime for your life. So
It definitely can. There is a genre that I came across recently that have been a lot. It's called trap jazz.
trap jazz.
Yes. And who is the artist that I think his name is Maseko.
Okay.
This kid is really talented. Like, there was a video, he made a song with this other guy in the studio, and he played almost all the instruments.
Wow.
And sang the song.
I'm definitely going to have to look into that.
Yeah, he's very talented.
Trap jazz. Wow. Okay. And so if you, like everybody else who has a radio or TV or some type of information, you heard about the murder of Nipsey Hussle, what are your thoughts on that?
So I do think it was unfortunate.
Definitely.
I knew who Nipsey Hussle was, but I did not follow his platform enough to know the impact he was making.
Right.
Before he passed. And I don't know if a lot of people did, but as for me, if I had known that, I certainly would have been paying more attention to him than I was prior to his death.
Right.
Because everything he was doing was amazingly inspirational.
Yes.
And I don't think everyone, for whatever reason, they just didn't know.
I didn't.
And that is probably the most unfortunate part, because we could not appreciate what he was doing while he was doing it.
Right.
And that part that always bothers me. So for my friends and family, I've always told them, if I pass and you're at the service, I'm not interested, and I don't want anyone telling any old stories or how much they love talking to me. Because if you didn't see me when I was here, you weren't that interested in seeing me now. So if you want to tell the stories and all of that, that's fine. But do it at the repast with everyone else. Don't have everybody in this church for 2 or 3 hours telling stories. Just go ahead and put me in the ground and tell stories somewhere else.
Right.
But don't listen to anybody that wasn't around when I was here.
Okay.
And everyone that you care about, tell them when you have them.
Right.
Don't tell them after they're gone, because they can't hear you anymore.
Right. Do you think it was a conspiracy? Do you think it was something more than what's being shown or told on the news?
So the thing about conspiracy theories is what makes them so intriguing is there is some level of fact to them. Even if it was a lie, every lie has to be based on the truth at its core. I think part of it could have been that. I don't know how much of it was that. Because I didn't grow up in bad neighborhoods. I knew people who were from some of those neighborhoods, and I do understand, not all of it, but I understand some of the reasoning behind what is done. Even if I don't agree with it, I do understand it.
Okay.
So on the one hand, for some of the people that have grown up in really bad neighborhoods, respect and people's perception of you is important. Whereas for me, I don't really care what anyone thinks of me. I care about what I think of me and the people that are important to me think of me.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the world, it doesn't matter, because I'm probably never going to see you anyway. But in that particular context, I get it. I don't agree with it, and I do think it can lead you to making bad decisions. Okay. Mostly because that line of thinking tends to be very temporary, kind of like making an emotional decision.
Right.
The emotion eventually passes, but you're left with the results of that decision. So it may be more to it than what everyone is telling us. I don't know if the guy was really trying to turn himself in for mental illness. He could have been, or he could have been paid off to make it happen. I think, at least for me, I'll probably wait until we all have more information, or at least I can find more information, and it's all resolved. And then we can take a look back and say, okay, well, these facts make sense, but this part over here doesn't fit into the rest of this. Why is that?
Right.
And let's look into that more and figure out why this doesn't fit with the rest of this until we have a complete picture.
Yeah. The thing that really makes me skeptical about it is if it was something that they didn't want seen, I don't think it'll ever be seen. Because, I mean, we look back at Tupac, we look back at Biggie, we look back at Malcolm X, we look back at Martin Luther King. I mean, just some things, I tell you. It's
you're right. I get it.
It's disheartening all the way around.
It is. I think that the difference between then and now is, so back then for Malcolm X and Tupac, a lot of the people in that generation still remembered slavery and what that was like. So there was still some levels of fear and just keep your head down and keep moving. For Tupac and Biggie, they didn't really have as much of that. But what they also didn't have was access to the information and the ability to create a platform to cause questioning. So they didn't have social media.
Right.
What we have today is we're far enough, at least for most of the millennials, they don't know. We know what slavery was in terms of context and history, but none of us, very few of us, know anyone that lived through it. So we don't have that same fear of it per se. And we also have the ability to cause questioning of governments or whatever entity may be in place. And if you raise enough questions and you shed enough light, you force the hand of whatever is taking place to play whatever hand it has.
Right.
But in the previous executions of those men, society didn't have the ability to do that. So I don't know. What I do have a concern about that would be the downfall would be the short attention span. So just because we have the ability to do it and millennials don't have the same fear that previous generations had, I don't know if they're going to stick to it long enough to find out the resolution. Because something else is going to come along and grab their attention and they're just going to be swept off into whatever the next thing is.
Okay. I'm going to let you go. I know I've had you long enough and I've enjoyed the conversation. But one last question I wanted to ask you, Reginald. How does your faith or what you believe shape and mold your everyday life?
So, that's an interesting one because my father was a pastor of a church before he passed. And I know a lot of pastors in Detroit. I don't, at least for me personally, I don't take the same approach most people would to faith, especially coming from my background. I think it's, at least for me, a simpler approach. Figure out what your moral compass is. and just do the best you can with the information you have at the time.
Okay.
So don't screw anybody over. Don't take advantage of people. Try to live by simple principles because they tend to be a better focal point when you get into choppy water, so to speak.
Okay.
You can simplify the process. So for myself, my father taught me when I was a kid, whenever you get upset or whatever emotional highs or lows you're feeling, if you ever want to calm yourself and think logically through it, take a deep breath, relax. Even if you're going crazy on the inside, make sure you're calm on the outside because it will help you think clearly.
Okay.
And simplify your process. So I remember when I was like 4 and he first told me that, I was scared of, I think it was an elephant stuffed animal in my closet or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay, well, when we turned the light on, before the lights went off, it was there. You knew what it was. When the lights went off, it's still there. You still know what it is. What you don't want to do is think, or what you want to do is think more critically about how did you come to the conclusion that it's something other than what you saw before? Where did you create all of these extra things? And when you can slow your mind down, because what fear will do is fuel itself.
Right.
So once you think, okay, well, it's a monster in the closet, and then the monster becomes huge and it eats children and whatever else it does, take a deep breath. It was a stuffed animal before. How did we go from stuffed animal to monster?
Right.
And when you can't make the connection, you realize how senseless it is. So for me, I try to take that same approach when I come across anything that's a little more challenging or it tends to shake me to my core. Let's slow down. Let's think about this. What are the principles? Let's stick to the principles. Doesn't matter what they did to you. Doesn't matter what they did to all these other people. None of that matters. What are your principles? Stick to your principles.
That's good.
Anybody else's principles or their moral compass or how they were raised, you're only responsible for yourself.
That's good. That's really good. It really shows that you are what you said, a critical thinker. And I think it has taken you and is going to continue to take you far. I'm going to leave it at that. And Reginald, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You really added a lot to a lot of the questions that I had about business and startups. So I really appreciate you. And I extend the offer for you to come back on anytime you feel that you have anything you want to share with us or the community. Please come back anytime.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure being here. This is my first podcast. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me on your platform. I will be listening going forward. I didn't know about your podcast before, and I listened. I can't think of the guy's name. He knew about politics, and you guys were talking about Kamala Harris.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, that was a really good one.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm so glad. Yeah, it's a new podcast, but I'm just trying to get everyone who has something to offer or to give back. I just want to have you on here so that we can just keep growing and getting that information out. So again, I appreciate you and come back anytime.
Thank you. I'll be sure to come back on, and I'm looking to continue our conversation.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning into the Nicole Harris podcast. As long as you keep tuning in, I'm going to keep giving you the best information that I have. And until next time, I'll see you out there.